The real horror behind the Irish Holocaust. Today I will read from my extensive notes on this topic and afterwards share some photos and improvise some remarks. Let's get started. What is the horror behind the Irish Potato Famine Holocaust? One of the horrors, and I'm being quite serious here, is lack of thinking. Seems like no one is thinking, not even the professors, about this heart-wrenching story, because it is heart-wrenching. Allow me to show you what the Great Potato Famine becomes when thoughtful analysis, thinking, is applied to the story. Like America's Great Depression, Ireland's Great Famine wasn't great, and maybe it wasn't even a famine, much less a potato famine. But let's work with what they tell us about it and think about their claims. The potato famine was, they tell us, a 7-year period of mass starvation and disease in Ireland from 1845 to 1852. The worst year of the famine was 1847, which became known as Black 47. Please note that 3 of these 4 numbers produce occult numbers. 7 years of potato famine. Think about that. We should expect intelligent people would stop planting potatoes after the first or second year of disastrous crop failure. But not the Irish. They plowed and planted straight ahead. Is that believable? Really? During those very biblical 7 years of hunger, yes, Ireland's 7 years of famine parallels the Bible story about Egypt's 7 years of famine, which is very suspicious, as we shouldn't believe stories in the Bible. Someone seems to have created an intentional parallel in Irish history to Egypt's history. Anyway, as I was saying, during those 7 years, an estimated 1 million people died from starvation and famine-related diseases such as typhus and cholera, and were buried in mass graves. Think about that. Even if family didn't have time or respect to bury their dead in individual graves, the mass graves, identified as potato graves, are all unmarked, which is very strange, because if your child or relative starved to death, you might at least mark the grave. And the Church of Ireland didn't mark the graves either. Why not? Not marking them would be disrespectful toward their customers. I mean, their faithful dreamers. And that's bad business policy, isn't it? Why weren't these graves marked? And why aren't any of the mass graves on Church of Ireland property? What is hidden in that fact? Was the church afraid of something? Additionally, to my limited knowledge, Irish authorities did not exhume and carbon date any of the bones. But that's just as well, because carbon dating is a scam, and even if it isn't, carbon dating wouldn't tell us if the people in the graves died of starvation, or typhus, or cholera. So on the basis of some government documents, we assume the Irish potato famine happened, and the bones of its victims lie in mass graves. Government documents, maybe historical documents too. Why don't we have photographs of exhumations and archaeological digs of the alleged famine-era mass graves? Apparently, strict ethical guidelines and respect for the dead prohibit photographing human remains. Respect. The skeletons can't even be identified by name, so who would feel disrespected? And living Irish don't know if any of their descendants died in the potato famine. No one specifically. They feel it's their ancestors in general, but they can't name anyone. Even My Heritage blog admits, quote, tracing famine-era ancestors can be challenging because many Irish records from the 19th century were incomplete or lost. However, research is often successful when it begins in the country where an ancestor settled. What kind of research? You can find out. Which of your ancestors was the first to migrate out of Ireland? You cannot find names of ancestors who were buried, died during the potato famine. But Irish diaspora could learn the name of ancestors, yes, who left Ireland. I doubt the records were lost, as is claimed. I suspect they never existed. Other reasons for doubting the authenticity of the potato Holocaust are not lacking. For example, historians claim Ireland's population is smaller today than it was before the famine of 1845. That is difficult to believe. The famine allegedly killed about a third of the 1844 population. And 180 years later, the Irish, many of whom were anti-birth control Catholics, did not increase their population by more than 30% over 180 years. They always had 2 children per family. Is that what we're supposed to believe? Really? And consider this fact. Although other countries such as India, South Africa, Iran, and others also allegedly suffered famines caused by the British, only the Irish claimed their population did not grow afterwards. Ireland's very exceptional claim is a reason to be skeptical. Additionally, other European nations suffered from potato blight during the same decade. But afterwards, the potato blight never returned. This is strange. It's a reason to be skeptical, to consider maybe this potato blight story is a hoax. In his book, Chris Fogarty argued in favor of the Irish genocide version of the famine story. But since he also believes in the Jewish Holocaust, I guess he isn't in the habit of radically questioning history. In a podcast with Fakeologist, he defended his argument with these words, quote, this is all indisputable fact. It's there. It's from the British government's own records, and I have 2 copies. Think about that. Should we imagine that the British documented the evidence of their crime, their deliberate starvation of Ireland? Why would they document the evidence and not destroy it? But I guess the logic is this: the documents exist, therefore they should be believed. As if they might not have ulterior motives for creating a new story to explain mass graves. I don't trust documents and texts. Solzhenitsyn wrote about the crimes of the communist regime in Russia, but I don't trust him either. The Bible documents the crimes committed by Jews, by God, by Rome, by Peter, and others, but I don't believe the Bible, nor should you. We should think about it, not believe it. Currently, Israel allows the Palestinians to freely document Israel's crimes against them. And Israel actually allows the Palestinians to post their damning videos on the internet. This is absurd. I don't believe those videos, nor do some others. Another reason to be skeptical of the Irish Holocaust was given by Irish History Podcast, which quoted written accounts claiming that in Ireland, 19th century adult males ate about 6 kilos of potatoes per day. 13 pounds. Quote, while that might sound unbelievable, that's attested by accounts of the time. They want us to believe that Irish people's diet in the 1800s was 100% potatoes. They ate nothing but potatoes. Why do people trust everything if it's in writing? 13 pounds of potatoes provides 30% more calories than most manual laborers need. Are we supposed to imagine that 19th century Irish men ate only potatoes and more? Here's another reason to reject both the Irish Potato Famine story and the British Genocide story. These two stories represent the usual false choice between it was an accident version of events and the it was a conspiracy version of events. Both versions claim the event was real. This is the same false choice we get with discussions of the American Indian smallpox Holocaust, 9/11, COVID, the Jewish Holocaust, and other stories. Both versions of the Irish Holocaust assume the famine and disease really killed approximately 1 million Irish over 7 years. I won't argue that no one died. People are always dying. And we have too many unmarked graves in Ireland. They need some explanation. Although most of those graves have less than 1,000 bodies, in fact, less than 100. And some have no number associated with them. But what if the Irish died not of famine and disease during a 7-year period, but of something worse, something that continued not for 7 years, but perhaps for 7 centuries? My friends won't be surprised to hear me propose that Irish Christians were not buried in unmarked mass graves, but that non-Christian Irish natives, heathens, were sacrificed for centuries by a cannibal class, commonly known as the aristocratic class. Could this theory explain the approximately 50 little mass graves sprinkled around Ireland? Could that explain why most of the graves are not being exhumed, and why some exhumed graves contain not intact skeletons, as one might expect from a famine, but bits and pieces of skeletons, as one might expect if cannibals are responsible? In my human waste lecture, I presented evidence of the world cannibal class operations in England, and I exposed the worldwide operations of that class in other lectures. So why should we imagine that Ireland avoided this plague? It was not spared, and if mass graves exist, they were probably created by the world cannibal class's sacrifices of human beings. Before I present evidence of Ireland's cannibal class, let's review 4 locations in Ireland with the largest alleged potato famine mass graves. Number 1 in Kilkenny. Yes, quite a few Irish towns are named Kill something. I did find that one of those once in Canada too was Kilbride. A lovely name to give your town. Kilkenny. Kilkenny City presently has 27,000 people. During the 2005 archaeological excavations, mass graves containing approximately 1,000 victims were unearthed on the grounds of the Kilkenny workhouse. The authorities did not provide any photos, not even of the digging. I mean, we don't have to see, do we? I guess we should. The results, the skeletons, but nothing. Approximately 1,000 victims. Why can't they give a specific number? Did they only find a heap of bones? That's not how we would expect victims of starvation and disease to be buried. That's evidence of cannibalism. Evaluation work at the Kilkenny workhouse site in 2005 unexpectedly revealed the remains of numerous inmates who never left the institution, the workhouse. The discovery of large quantities of skeletal material, not full intact skeletons, skeletal material, was a shock, as the workhouse did not lie on consecrated ground. No, these mass burials, graves, are never on church property, I suspect. Excavation followed in 2006, undertaken by so-and-so, revealed 63 mass burials, the largest number ever to be unearthed within Ireland. These graves proved to hold the remains of at least 970 individuals. 63 mass graves spread over 7 years. It's about 1 a month, a little less maybe. Each grave has about 16 to 15 bodies. That's about 1 death every 2 days. Anthropologist Dr. Johnny Geber conducted a 10-year study on the bones and teeth, revealing the victims died primarily from infectious diseases such as typhus and severe scurvy rather than direct starvation. But native Irish would know how to avoid scurvy in winter. So I don't understand how free people in the mid-1800s living on land in Ireland could die of scurvy. Potatoes are not the only source of vitamin C. In fact, historically, the traditional Irish diet relied heavily on locally grown, unprocessed whole foods. The primary sources of vitamin C were the classic staple crops, leafy brassicas, and foraged wild plants, not potatoes. And leafy greens successfully grow during the Irish winter. So why did people die of vitamin C deficiency, scurvy? Something else was happening. Historians believe thousands of Irish came to seek refuge in the workhouse in Kilkenny during the famine. But Ireland has huge churches. And Dublin and Belfast have enormous Gothic, Victorian, and Romanesque buildings. Why didn't the hungry Irish go there? Why to that ugly workhouse in Kilkenny? And why didn't the aristocracy in Ireland feed the hungry fish? And the church, why didn't they? Ireland's aristocrats aren't even accused of being part of the problem or of being responsible for it. The Irish Holocaust promoters don't even wonder what the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of aristocrats and clerics living in Ireland were eating. Didn't they want any potatoes? Why do we believe documents that claim Ireland's potatoes were sent to England? Did English aristocrats desperately want to eat Irish potatoes? More so than Irish aristocrats? The story is slightly ridiculous. We'll look at St. John the Evangelist Church in Kilkenny later. Speaking of the church and cannibalism, who remembers Irish cleric and sicko Jonathan Swift, the author of A Modest Proposal? It's a satire set in Dublin, written well before the Irish famine, allegedly. Set in Dublin, Ireland. It is widely interpreted to be a satire of the British landlords who caused severe poverty and hunger among the Irish. Swift's story is written from the perspective of a heartless British bureaucrat who proposes to solve the problem of poverty and hunger in Ireland by letting Irish parents sell their babies as meat to their British landlords. What kind of sick mind thinks of such stories? Scholars believe Swift hoped the British elites would read his story, feel guilty, and stop reducing the Irish to penury and hunger. This is absurd. The ruling elites don't have consciences, and they actually approve of eating human flesh. They've never been known to be touched, converted, reformed by literature or letters. Send all the letters you want to your politicians. Makes no difference. 99%, maybe 100% of the time. I'm sure Swift knew this, so the satire was actually directed at all the naive people who believe Swift was writing fiction in order to help the Irish. Meanwhile, he, an employee of the Church of Ireland, which is part of the Anglican Church, did not point his finger at the church for ignoring and enabling the suffering of the Irish. I guess he wanted to keep his job with an institution that promotes symbolic cannibalism through the Eucharist ceremony. Hint, hint. Yeah, someone just reminded me, a scholar, that the Eucharist ceremony is not actually meant to be symbolic. Those who partake in it are supposed to imagine that they are actually eating the body of Jesus Christ and drinking his blood. But I digress. Let's examine the next location of an alleged mass grave in Ireland, the town of Dingle. I believe all the towns I cover are on the west coast. The Dingle Famine Graveyard, discovered relatively recently. Uh-huh. 180 years had to pass. But this site holds an estimated 10,000 victims of the crisis. Estimated. Why can't they have a, a an accurate number? But the 2022 population of Dingle, Ireland was only 1,671. Such a small town with 10,000 victims of hunger. Did people just walk to Dingle 180 years ago so that they could die? How did they imagine that such a small town could help them? What were they doing? This doesn't make any sense. 10,000 people go to a town of under 2,000 to look for what? It has no workhouse. But Dingle has two very nice, very old churches, St. Mary's and St. James. Next town, Skibbereen, has the Abbey graveyard. Abbey sometimes. The largest mass graves from Ireland's Great Potato Famine are located in Abbey graveyard in Skibbereen, County Cork. It is the final resting place for an estimated 8 to 10,000 victims. Despite this claim, the famine mass graves, or even mass pits, have never been opened and examined. Well, I believe the people whose skeletons are in the mass graves, if they are in those mass graves, died over a much longer period of time, probably before the alleged famine genocide of Irish Christians. I believe the Irish who died were pre-Christians, pagans, who were sacrificed in churches and cathedrals by the world cannibal class. During the 1800s, the WCC stopped their operation in Ireland because no native people remained. The countryside was depopulated of its large wild game, too. And it was time for a reset, more on which later. Skibbereen has two churches, old, quite grand ones, I believe. The Abbey Struary Church and St. Patrick's Church. Both churches are approximately 1 kilometer from the graveyard. Sadly, I strongly suspect the skeletons buried in Abbey Struary graveyard belong to people who were killed and cooked in those nearby churches. Every native non-Christian man was a sacrificial Jesus for the cannibals. Fourth site, Kilrush, has the old Shanachkyle Cemetery. It contains the remains of an estimated 2,000 to 10,000 famine victims. That's a very large range, 2,000 to 10,000. Obviously, this grave has not been exhumed nor scanned with any bone detecting radar. Kilrush is the nearest town to this cemetery. Kilcock and Kilcarroll are nearby. The cemetery is less than 2 kilometers from the center of town and its churches. The population of Kilrush, County Clare, Ireland, is under 3,000, according to 2022 census. Again, why did 2,000, even that? Why would 2,000 people come to Kilrush to die? Not even to die on consecrated church ground. Um, Kilrush also has a church named Saint Senan Church. It's very impressive. It was named after the imaginary Saint Senan Mac Gurkin. Gherkin. I'm attempting an Irish pronunciation. It's spelled Geircinn. I suspect it sounds a lot like gherkin, meaning cucumber. So this saint is named after an edible vegetable. Another cannibal joke. While the world cannibal class depopulated Ireland of its natives, it also began destroying their culture by raising them in fortresses and later in underground catacombs. Officially, no large catacombs exist in Ireland, but St. Michael's Church in Dublin has crypts that might be much larger than we are permitted to know. I believe Irish pagans were forced to live underground in Dublin and Belfast, at least in London. After several generations, they lost their culture, and sometime in the 1800s, they were indoctrinated into Christianity and into the work for money world, the world the Irish still inhabit. This same pattern was repeated around the world with different religions and different currencies, but and of course, agriculture began at that time, I believe, large-scale agriculture. So yeah, the same happened around the world, essentially the same pattern. We get a clue about the other function of holy places. I've mentioned that other function, claiming that, there's a story which claims that the mummies in the crypt of St. Michael's Church inspired Bram Stoker, author of Dracula. Apparently, Stoker knew the church was a place where the world cannibal class operated. The church, or I should say, churches. The churches were slaughterhouses, kitchens, and the WCC's members consumed flesh and blood, very much like Dracula. Curiously, the name Dracula might derive, according to some people, from the Irish words droch fola, I'm guessing DROCH hyphen FHOLA, droch which translates as bad blood. Yes, members of the WCC wanted to replace their bad blood with good, young blood. Christ Church Cathedral also has crypts in Dublin. Finally, in his stories, Irish author James Joyce often mentioned symbolic cannibalism. But in his novel Ulysses, the protagonist imagines literal cannibalism in a church. He knew. James Joyce did. In episode 6, Hades, the underworld, of the same book, Leopold Bloom, the protagonist, attends a funeral at Mount Jerome Cemetery and contemplates that cemetery. I quote, "His head might come up out of the ground someday in a landslip, whatever, with his hand pointing. Pointing at what?" And this quotation continues, "All honeycombed, the ground must be oblong cells." He's imagining the cemetery honeycombed with graves. Why did Joyce associate a cemetery with a honeycomb? Very odd. Honeycombs are full of life. I suspect James Joyce knew that the underground, aka Hades, was actually a place where humans were being bred in cell-like chambers, just as bees are bred in honeycomb cells. Note, James Joyce's initials, JJ, are code for 10 and 10, J being the 10th letter in the alphabet. And 10 plus 10 is 20. In Roman numerals, XX, which is the sign of the double-crossing psychopaths. Now let's share some photos and I'll improvise some comments. We start here. Little article and photo of the workhouse in Kilkenny. It's quite a workhouse. Why did workhouses exist? Why did people in the mid-1800s not have houses from which to travel to their workplace? No, they lived in workhouses. I don't think poverty just appeared slowly in Ireland. I think we're dealing with, or the reason for these workhouses is that the native people who were raised underground and farmed, propagated, when they were brought out with zero native culture, zero knowledge of the old ways, they had no families, they had no homes. But their masters had prepared the new world for them and provided them with workhouses. And only afterwards did people get their own houses. It's quite an ugly place to live. Here we are in Dublin. The enormous wealth that the church, so-called church, has always had, long before the Irish Potato Famine. Their churches are a testament to that wealth, and much more than a testament to wealth. Here are what are they called again? Sarcophagi, supposedly of noblemen. Yes, that's the story they give us. I've argued elsewhere that sarcophagi were actually large cookware designed to be heated by concentrated sunshine concentrated by magnifying lens, large ones. And these would hold, yes, human victims. This sarcophagi here, this beige one, off-white one, is decorated with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 2 halves. These are, what are they? Are they shields or are they pots? They look like pots to me. Maybe they're shields too. This one has, well, we'll see it. We'll see a better image later elsewhere. These are like flames. 3 people here, very figurative. One woman holding a child. Are they related? I doubt it. Here is a drainage trench, which are important for very large slaughterhouses and kitchens. Yeah, that's better. There we go. Yeah, these are shields. Two shields. Another shield, three people. Let's see if there are any more good photos here. No, let's move on. This is in the town of, what town is this? The St. Canice Cathedral. I believe it's in one of the towns I mentioned. Yeah, Kilkenny. Very large building, this cathedral, Kilkenny, in Kilkenny. This tower is unusual feature. What is it doing there? It is actually attached to the church. This is an airport for airships. This tower has a stairwell. It is a stairwell for ascending up and down, and they need it because they don't have a proper tower on which to receive airship passengers. Carving, maybe on one of the sarcophagi, tomb effigy. Quite a few tombs too. The church might look a little rustic and gray on the outside, but they are luxurious inside. Here is a long drainage trench again. The pews, as I always say, were added later. They are not even, well, they're bolted to this beautiful floor, spoiling it in part. What do we have here? In Kilkenny City. And it's not the smallest of the four towns, I guess, was the biggest. How many people were there? Um, One moment. Population of Kilkenny was, I don't remember now. Where is my note on that? Oh, nearly 30,000 people right now. And obviously it has some old world buildings, not just churches. Uh, why did people run to the workhouse? Didn't local people open their arms to the hungry? No, the local people were aristocrats, so they wouldn't open their arms, would they? But we don't want to talk about the possibility that Irish people were partly responsible for the Irish Holocaust. And it's not my argument either. It's not Irish people, it's aristocrats. They're hardly people, they're subhuman. Lovely place to visit, I assume. Rothaus. They offer a dark and haunted tour. I'm sure it won't be as dark as the one I'm offering. Kilkenny, another beautiful building there, a medieval castle. Castles were prisons for native people. Well, this looks very upscale. This was not a prison, but the aristocrats always lived near their operations, their farms. Lovely place. This website has a lot of images of the sarcophagi and Kilkenny again. They left their black stone because they are dark people. Of course, all these sarcophagi are associated with noblemen, aristocrats, as if they would want to be remembered wearing their armor, holding a sword, armor that was never used in battle. That's all. It's all a delusion that falls apart when thinking is applied. As I believe I proved in my lecture on armor, another close-up of a sarcophagi. Again, this one has three, most of them have 6 images like this under, I'm not sure what these arches are called. These 6 arches are mimic the 6 arches that run along either side of the main nave in these Irish churches. There's another drainage trench. These 6 figures are referred to as the weepers. The weepers, really. Do they look like they are weeping? Each of them is holding a slightly different instrument. Are they tenderizers? Are they carving knives? I suspect it's all related to the business of the kitchen and the rituals performed there, sometimes with books, script for themselves. Yes, they also cast spells on themselves, not only on us. They have to when you're a cannibal and you're sacrificing humans, children included, you must cast spells on yourself. This one has some interesting engravings. There's, I guess, the heart of a human heart with 2 daggers through it. Yes, you can tell they love you. They love humanity when they have images of hearts with daggers through them. This is a pole with a serpent entwined, the serpent referring to the syringes used long ago to extract and inject blood. 3 pieces of cookware, looks like. And this is those flames that we saw on the shield earlier. I think they represent flames, I'm guessing. There are initials on it, initials RB associated with I think, imaginary Richard Butler. Noblemen. Do noblemen name themselves Butler? It's dubious. Just like, what was that? British dynasty named just before Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth. She was part of it. Oh, I forgot. That's another funny name for aristocrats. It'll come back to me. King James the First. What was his dynasty? Something like Butler. There's a shield with a cross, and I suppose that's supposed to be the crown of thorns worn by Jesus, but I suspect this is really barbed wire. Here we have the six more weepers, each of them holding a different tool or instrument. I can't imagine what they were used for. Or maybe I don't want to imagine. Six more. Someone smashed off the face. Hmm. Maybe that face revealed something. That seems very deliberate. You wouldn't be able to do that just quietly while your tour guide isn't watching. Again, the six, these funny headdresses that were placed on, I guess, the sacrificial victims. Why? To dehumanize them, look like strange antlers. There's another butler. Well, enough of sarcophagi. We move on. We're still in Kilkenny. There's better pictures of the castle, beautiful downtown, worth visiting perhaps. St. Canis's Cathedral and Round Tower. There's that round tower again with the stairwell in it. The Black Abbey, also in Kilkenny, a different building from the churches. There's plenty of places that could have housed the starving Irish, walking across the countryside to find food. No, they went to the workhouse, which was overcrowded, they say, holding as much as twice as many, three times as many as it should have. There's an old, very old castle, just the ruins remain. And where are we now? Belfast, another, I guess, Ireland's second largest city. This is where the aristocrats lived. Did they not want Irish potatoes? Did they let them all be exported into England? I doubt it. Well, I doubt they were interested in potatoes. They are mostly carnivores and carnivorous. This is also in Belfast, just to give you a sense of the wealth that was in the country 200 years ago, the number of aristocrats that lived there. And back in Kilkenny, I'll share some more photos from my slides in a moment. Last photo, no, not a photo at all, just a drawing and an article about the beehive symbol. You remember my reading ended with a reference to James Joyce's Leopold Bloom referring to a graveyard as being honeycombed. Well, that does invoke beehives too. Beehives contain honeycombs. And the beehive is a Masonic symbol. Indeed, it is. It's not just because the slave class produces honey for the ruling class. No, the slave class is the honey and meat of the ruling class, the WCC. Now, I will share something new from my slides. One moment. This is all I could find with an image search for potato famine graves and skeletons. There is virtually nothing available. These are bits and pieces, not well-preserved skeletons. This is just one skeleton, maybe with a second child skeleton buried. Maybe this could have been a woman, right? The wide hips and the leg bones angled inwards, as someone recently reminded me. Um, there's bits and pieces here. Why is the skull destroyed? Well, we don't know, but this is not much. Here's another pile of bones, not intact skeletons. I've shared this picture before, but it seemed very appropriate today. It is a painting from Salerno, the Salerno Cathedral in the city of Salerno in Italy somewhere. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that looks like a baby infant holding a potato, and the baby is held by the mother. What kind of joke is this? The mother is holding the edible child, and the child is holding the edible potato. That's the joke. The mother, not the mother, no, this is a woman, obviously no interest in this child. Kilkenny, St. Mary's Cathedral. They had money, those aristocrats, resources, not money, resources, and technology. Again, Kilkenny, another cathedral. Inside, there's the drainage trench. There's the Masonic tile pattern. I don't think electric lamps hung from the ceilings 200 years ago. Perhaps large magnifying glasses. This is in Kilkenny again, nice flat top, no steeple on the top. This is a good landing place for aristocrats moving by airship. Kilkenny. Again, St. Mary's. Again, St. Mary's. St. Mary's. Oh, too many. Here's a very old St. James in Dingle. Yeah, maybe that's how they started, with very simple, primitive churches before they improved their building techniques and technologies. That's the same one, St. James in Dingle. Very basic, but they did manage to have a landing spot. St. Patrick's Cathedral, Skibbereen, Kilrush, St. Senans. Here we are in Belfast. Has quite an old world downtown center, Belfast. How many aristocrats lived there? I guess this is an AI or a painting, just a painting of what Belfast was like in the past. Much wider boulevards. Belfast. One of the two crypts at St. Michael's Church, open for public viewing. Again, I don't think we're allowed to know quite how large these crypts are. They might really be catacomb size, perfect for underground human farming. Dublin, Christchurch. It's a complex. It's not just one building. inside. Yes, but the Irish starved for potatoes. Dublin Customs House. Looks like classical Rome. Romanesque. Doors to the crypts at one of the churches, probably Christ Church. No, St. Michael's crypts. Two doors. Yes, metal doors with once upon a time had locks, I suppose. Why do they need two doors? That's where the human farm existed, or holding cells. They're quite extensive. Um, they're not unique around the world. This is quite common beneath cathedrals, churches. Looks very familiar for me, having done research, related research for other countries. Dublin, and we end with a reminder of the symbolism, secret societies that now are operated or controlled by the aristocracy that continue farming us, sacrificing us, if not literally, certainly financially, economically, culturally, using us for their entertainment. I suspect mostly that's the only purpose we have for them if we're not being raised for blood and meat. Well, I recently shared information about how to contact me, so, and how to purchase my books. So I hope some people avail themselves of that opportunity. I'm going to slow down a little bit and focus on getting more books on Lulu. I think that's important. Those books have been in process for 20 years, so I feel it's overdue to finish that work. Be well, be healthy, take care of yourselves, and think, for goodness sake, we must all do more thinking and not imagine that everything we're told is true. It certainly isn't. Well, enough for today. Take care.